Okay. So let me just move my prep notes aside, and let's open up our major project. Can everyone hear and see me, or hear me okay, and can see my screen okay? Yep, awesome. Eric, let the record reflect that Lindsay totally got to the keyboard before you on that one. All right, let's close all this stuff down and start to design what we want our new look and feel to be. Eric's being very generous in the chat and giving himself a 15-4 loss, but I think it's more like 28-2. But yeah, he's got a young child, so we'll give him a break. So in our app, we want to create a new login screen. So I'm going to say new activity, empty activity. Now you can see some of these other elements here, like fragment and view model. For the length of time we have for this course, it's just a little too much to jump into all those different tools. But what I'd say is the fragment's actually probably the most elegant way to handle the login process, because what fragments are, and again, I'm not going to teach them, but basically you can have sort of, let's call it a shell of your activity, and then you can swap different fragments in for pieces of it. So you could ask for the email, and then when you hit next, validate if it's a new user, old user, and then pick a different fragment to go into that space to get just their password, or do we get their username, password, and all those other things too. So let's do a new sign-in activity. So I'm going to call this what do I call this? The styled sign-in. So I'm just creating a new activity. I'm calling it styled login, or styled sign-in activity. And we'll hit finish. That's going to create two files for me, my Kotlin file and my activity file. And again, from a naming convention, see how I put the word activity right in there? Just helps it. So in the group chat, Eric said, hey, shouldn't we have made that the launcher activity? Yeah, absolutely we could have. I'm going to style it, and then I'll just update the build, not the build Gradle, the manifest file. So you can do it either way. If you say it's a launcher activity, the downside is it sort of makes two launcher activities, and then it can cause problems in other ways. So I'm going to make my binding class here. And there's no right time to do that little bit of code. Personally, I just like to do it right at the beginning, because this in my head is sort of when I'm creating the activity, and later I wanted to be able to just use the binding. I really wish, as they have scaffolded this, when it creates a new activity, it would just do this part for you automatically. I don't know why you can do the onCreate and not the binding if you have view binding turned on, but I didn't build the tool, so we'll just add it. All right, so let's go to our layout file. There it is, way down here. And one of the other things I noticed that I didn't put in my observations, I used the Nexus 5 when I was marking. And I think several people used a screen or an emulator that had a wider screen than the Nexus 5. And normally what will happen is the phone will adapt to the design as long as it's not hard-coded. So if you have really fixed sizes for a lot of elements, it doesn't adapt well to the different screen sizes. So it's better to use things like, wrap text, wrap content, match parent, when you're setting the height and the width of things. Okay, so what do we want? Well, if we want to style it, we want it to look like our application, we need to, or we should, maybe put our logo onto the main screen. So when the user first goes to the application, boom, it sees the logo, because that's going to be the thing they identify from when they grabbed it off the App Store. So a few weeks ago, I had given you some default images, where I guess it would have been week 7 or 8 when we did deployment. So let's go in here. So I had you create a folder. I called it deployment assets. It could have been anything you like. But it kept all of these images of our application running. And one of them was a logo that I had created. And what I'd like to do is use this logo in our application. So a fast way to do this is just to right-click and to go copy. So I'm hopeful everyone found their assets that you used for deployment. And we're going to copy the logo. And then I'm going to go back into the drawable folder here and paste. And we'll say OK. OK. This is going to complain probably. Yeah. So here I broke the naming convention with an uppercase letter. Doesn't like that. So we'll refactor, rename, and let's call it logo. That logo is on Blackboard. It'd probably be under week 8, the deployment week. Yeah. So under our course, if you go to weekly learning, week 8, and you scroll down to where it says class slides and images, there's the logo 512 by 512 right there. So you can download that. Now, one of the questions, in fact, the most common question I have received on all the quizzes is with respect to what's the best image format to use in your Android application. And who wants to hazard a guess what the best image type is to use in our Android application? Is it JPEG, PNG, WebP? All right. I got to vote for WebP. Why are you voting for WebP? Let's bring the chat into. He's voting for WebP because he got it in his quiz. What is there another reason? Smaller size with less memory. You got it. Thanks. But but it's visually the same quality. You're correct. So yes, it does depend on what you're trying to do, but for the most part, the WebP is going to be much smaller. So let's take a look at our logo here. So it's in our drawable folder, and it's a PNG file. If I right-click on it, and I go down to the bottom here, it says Convert to WebP. And you can set, what quality level you want. So if you have a very simple, mostly one color type of thing, you can make the quality pretty low and it'll still look the same. But we'll go 75% of the original and say OK. So on the left is my original PNG file, and on the right is my WebP file. In this case, it's not a huge difference. It's 1/3 the size, which is a big difference, but the original file wasn't that big. But if this original file was a few megs, that's a big deal on a mobile device. So I'll just say finish, and add it to GitHub, sure. And what you see is Android Studio does a brilliant job of this. It converted my PNG file to WebP and removed, 2/3 of the size, and it actually got rid of the old PNG file, so it doesn't clutter up our folder here. And if you double-click on it, you can see the original file, which there's a discussion about transparency with WebP, and I don't sincerely know the answer. I believe this has got a transparent background already, but let's check. Does WebP support transparency? So it looks like it does support transparency. So that's a good thing. Okay. So we've got a new logo. So let's go to our layout file. And I'm going to just drag in an image view. And when the image view comes up, it's going to automatically ask me, well, what image do you want in here? So I can go to my logo, say OK. And I'm going to drag it so it's in the middle, and I'll attach it to the top. Now, the challenge here is that this is actually eating up far too much of my screen, right? So what I can do is I can put a constraint on this. So you see here, the layout height, it says wrap the content. So my options would be I could make a smaller version of the logo. I think this one was 512 by 512. Or I could restrict its height. So I could say, for example, 400 dp or 300 or 200. And it's going to scale it actually not bad for me. Okay, so all I did is I changed the layout height. Now, just before this I said, hey, wherever possible, don't hard code things like height and width. So if I look at this on a tablet, it's going to be a lot smaller than it could be. That's the downside of putting in a fixed width there, or a fixed height. Okay, so the next thing we want to add is some buttons. So we can add buttons multiple ways. You can use the design view, and actually the design view is probably the fastest way to add one. But I'll just say button and say wrap content. And then I can start to add some different attributes here. So let's see. What do I have in here? Text. Now in Android, they talk, if you ever read their design documents, they talk about the value of icons. Because obviously sign in with email, that makes the button a certain size. But if you use consistent symbols throughout your application, if you don't have enough real estate to put a big button with lots of words, you can just put the symbol and people will associate them together. So one of the things that we can do here is you can say drawable. And you see we have drawable left, bottom, and right, top. So I'm going to say drawable left. And I want to put an email email icon in there. So in order to do that, I'll have to go to my drawables class. I don't have an email today. So I can right click and say new vector asset. And if you click on the clip art, you're probably getting very familiar with this as you go through the class. And if you just type email, you can see there's several icons already pre-built for email. So I'm going to take this one here and say OK. I can leave the rest the same. Say next and finish. Okay, so that added the email to my drawables folder. So now I can say, if I start typing email, you see it comes up with a drawable email. So I can just pick that, and now it'll put a little email icon in my button. And then I can position my button. So if I want it centered, I can say start to start of the parent, end to end of the parent. And if I want it underneath my logo, then I want the top of it to be related to the bottom of the image view. So now I have a logo, and I have sign in with email that is color themed the same as the rest of my application. And if I change the color theme, this will automatically change. So that's kind of nice. So let's just tune up a couple items here. One, and just call this image view. It's probably good to call it the logo in some way. So I'm going to hold down Shift and push F6. And then I can call this the logo image view. By doing that, it changes it everywhere that it's referenced all at once. And here, this is complaining because I didn't put that in my strings file. So I just can click in there with my cursor, do Alt-Enter, extract the string resource, say OK. And let's see what this is. It says, do drawable start. Now, I played with this actually just last night, and I couldn't get drawable start to show for me. So I think I'm missing something minor. I don't know why. I don't know what the difference is between drawable start and drawable left. Drawable left works for me, but when I do later, I'll show you how to use the material themed text, edit text. And there it likes you to use start versus left. So probably orientation adjustments. Yeah, Eric, you're probably right. Maybe there's something about when you rotate it, it behaves differently. So we have sign in with email as a button, and I'm going to just leave it at that for now. In terms of, we could add another button for Google, but for now, let's just get this one working. Okay, so once they, let's start thinking through the design. So the user comes to the scene, they see our logo, and maybe we don't want these right tight together. We can center it in whatever space remains. So it doesn't matter what size of phone we have, it's going to put it in the middle. But where do we want to go once they sign in with email? Well, we need to go to some kind of a scene where we can get the user's credentials. So let's design that now. We'll create a new scene. And this is where I was saying if we have fragments, we could just move fragments in and out in this space down here. But I'm going to do it as a whole new activity, which is a little bit more files, but it's not having to teach a whole new area at the end of a course. So I'm going to right click and say new activity, empty activity. And in here, let's do get credentials activity. Okay, hang on here. I'm going to deal with my, had some kind of conflict, it said, and it just disappeared. It said in my value strings. I don't think I added anything to that. Strange. It did the same with you. Huh. I've never experienced that before. Weird. Okay, well, we've got our get credentials page. Now, what we want the user to do is have a similar experience from the first scene, right? Because this is all still part of the login process. So what I'm going to recommend is we'll bring an image view in here, and we'll grab our logo again. This time I'm going to make it even a little bit smaller. So just to give more screen to work with. If it didn't happen for you, Eric, if you didn't get the same error warning as me, well, you're just not chosen. Your code works too well. And the first thing we want to add is a field for the user to enter their email address. So the email address is what's stored as one of the unique keys for a user in Firebase Auth. So let's take a look at a different way of. I'm just going to spend a lot of time researching this one. To get an option. I'm gonna paste this into the chat for you in just a moment. Let's get this working here. So I'll leave it like that for now. And let's leave that there. Okay, I think this will all fit into the chat. Looks like it did. So paste this into your get credentials XML file. And it'll start to lay out like this. We've got a little work to do, but we'll get it there. So hopefully you're able to grab it from the chat and just paste it in underneath our logo. And what we have here is sort of this nested concept. So I have a text input layout. So it's this object is part of the material design layout, and this is, we were talking earlier about like, well, what's plagiarism versus snippets? So this would be an example of a snippet. It's designed to be a reusable component. So if you look online under material, Android's material design text fields, you can find snippets like this. The big thing is how do you adapt them to fit your needs and to have a consistent user experience throughout your application. Excuse me. So in here, I'm not sure why this is complaining. We'll extract the string resource, put that in our strings file. And then our text color, we'll do primary. And so now what we have is this enter email text field. It has an icon, so it's styled to look like our application. And we can kind of go one step further here and let's just make it match the parent. And what we want, if we want to kind of I think what they've pre-built for us in that automated user or pre-built UI is you click the next button and then it's going to validate if the email already exists or not. And if it does exist, it says, hey, welcome back. Enter your password. And if it doesn't exist, then it says, hey, give us your user, give us a password and your name, and then they add it to the database. So let's add a button here. And just following the style that they're using, they have a next, and we'll give this an ID of next button. Okay, so I'm a big fan of build a little and test a little. So let's try getting to this point and see if we can validate if this user already exists or not. So to do that, I'm going to go to my Android manifest file. And we have in here our new activities. And this field exported, if they're not exported, they tend to give us problems. So I'm going to change this value to be true. And we want our styled sign-in activity to be our launcher. So I'm going to put a closing bracket and an activity here. So So once you have it set up that way, you can just grab the launcher filter from down below and paste it in here. So hopefully at this point in the semester, this type of activity feels pretty routine, pretty easy to do. And so what's going to happen is we get to this styled sign-in activity, and when the user clicks, log in with email, we want to go to our get credentials activity. So in our controller here, we just need to set up click listener. I'm looking at it because I'm like, where's my button? Maybe I didn't give it an ID. Activity styled sign in. Aha, I didn't give it an ID. So I'll call this email login button. Okay, so that's in my activity styled sign in. Now when I go back to my controller, I can say email login button, set on click listener, and we just have to call a new intent to change to our get credentials activity. So I'll say start activity, intent, this. So any questions about this so far? This is stuff we've been doing. So hopefully this is feeling pretty familiar. If I'm going too fast, the best way to slow me down is ask me a lot of questions. All right. So the next thing we need to do here is we want to validate if the user's already in our Firebase authentication system. So I'm going to go to my get credentials activity. And now I need to start looking at the website to see what do we do. Okay, so go to getting started with Firebase SDK. So we're already using Firebase auth. We'd already set that up, so we don't have to set up the dependencies. Those are already done. We're really just adding some style to what we already have. So it says add a variable called auth for Firebase auth. So if I go to my application now, I'm going to put this global variable called Firebase auth and import the libraries. Go back to the website. See how well I can do these two together. And it says when you initialize your activity, check to see if the user is currently signed in. So in the onCreate method, that's the very first one that's called. After it's created, it goes to an onStart. And it's possible the user's already logged into the application, in which case, we can just move on to our next scene. So that's where we can copy this piece of code and paste it in here. Now we don't need to, reload our scene. If they're already logged in, let's just take them to the grid recycler activity. So I can just say start activity, intent, this,